So in this section, we're going to be looking at the next pillar of Islam, which is zakat, which is charitable giving. There's 3 different types you need to know about. The first one is zakat, the compulsory giving set down by Muhammad as one of the key 5 pillars of Islam. There's the Khums, which is an Islamic tax consisting of 20% of a person's excess earnings, and the Sadaq, which means voluntary giving, so giving extra above and beyond what is required. And you'll see the 2 questions we've been working towards at the bottom of the screen. Explain the reasons and benefits for giving zakat in Islam, and the extent to which Islam is based in support for the poor. So you'll find the summary sheet attached to the homeworks on this. So fill this in as we go along, and we're going to be defining zakat, khums, sadaq, talking about the purpose of giving, the attitudes to the poor, and we're talking about evaluation questions as well. Like fasting, giving is not new to religion. Both Jewish and Christian tribes before Islam have specific teachings about kind of giving. In Islam, however, there's these different types of giving which we've talked about. They were set down by Muhammad as a compulsory act of alms or charity. And it can include money, but it also can include possessions, animals, livestock, money accumulated on land, and investments as well. So let's look at the reasons for giving in Islam. So it's often given at important times of the year, so the end of Hajj and also the Eid festivals. It's also for wealthier people as well to gain some benefits, because it actualizing kind of a will of Allah by doing something he's commanded them, and so they'll get some benefits from that, as well as the poor who receive it also getting a spiritual benefit as well. Because it's obligatory, you're reiterating, you're following kind of the key teachings, and you're following Muhammad's example and his commands. And there's some specific benefits that Muslims believe you get from giving as well. So obedience, compassion, personal sacrifice, and the individual and communal benefits of physical and spiritual rewards which you receive. Also, it's important to recognise Islam is a liberationist religion. What it means is Islam helps the poor. And let's develop that a little bit more with this slide. And so it's essential to Muslim identity to care, compassion for one's fellow humans, and that's an actual feeling. And when you do that, you feel better because you want to ease the suffering kind of others. Also, if you have wealth, you're lucky enough to give some away and you get some spiritual benefit from that. It also helps Muslims to remember that they're humble before Allah, and that every blessing they have in his life comes from him. It's also a reminder that they shouldn't hoard wealth. They should help the ummah, the brothers and sisters, their fellow humans as well. And also, if you're giving away regularly, it makes you a better person. You're practicing, you're doing a good thing, and you're becoming a better Muslim over time. So if we have a look at the 3 different types of giving now, the first one we're going to look at is zakah. So in Islam, the ummah is very important, and the more fortunate Muslims have a duty to help the less fortunate, both within their own families and in the wider community. The most important way of helping is through the payment of zakah, and zakah is a different word in translation into English. So zakah means to purify, and it is an obligation for most Muslims and one of the 5 pillars of Islam, and it is a form of worship of Allah. And so zakah is paid once a year at the rate of 2.5%, and it depends on how wealthy you are and what sort of wealth you have. For example, if you have more than 30 cows, you'll have to pay 1 cow as your zakah. You must pay zakah on cattle, crops, gold and silver, and the idea is it purifies your wealth so you can feel satisfied in the wealth you do have after you've paid this money away. It's important to recognise Islam doesn't see anything wrong with wealth, but it's also a form of kind of social justice as well. So the next slide, I'll put it on now, just develops that a little bit more and gives you an idea of kind of like how zakat is kind of given. And zakat isn't paid on your essentials like food, housing. It's meant to be only things which are kind of extras after you've got your basics kind of sorted. So the second type you need to know about is called sadaq, and I've used a little clip from the Boomerang Pass It On video here, which is where acts of kindness pass from one person to the next. I've used this clip to illustrate a point about the next one, which is sadaq is voluntary giving above and beyond what is required. And so even small acts of kindness, including smiling at people, picking up rubbish, helping animals, can be examples of this. And a good quotation to support that is every good action is a charity, and that is a good action to meet a friend with a smiling face. So Islam is one of a few religions which treats smiling as a charitable act, which is a nice thing. So to develop that, there's also an idea called Sadak Jahiyah, pronounce that terribly. When a man dies, his deeds come to an end except three: an ongoing charity, beneficial knowledge, and a child who prays for him. And so many Muslims will try and donate money or time to causes which will keep on giving. So this is like a long-term aid. So building a hospital, investing money in a charity which will keep on doing good works, supporting schools or education. So any act which you could support which has long-term effects. So a popular question they might ask is what the benefits are. So spiritual, moral, and social benefits of kind of giving to charity. That might be quite difficult for you to do at this stage. So what I'm going to do is I'll put up the next slide with some ideas to show you what you could include in that discussion. And you could get a few paragraphs discussing these different ideas. So the final one you need to know about is called the Khums. This is a concept that originated with the idea of war booty at the time of Muhammad. And so if they went into battle and there was a certain amount of wealth or booty which was received, they would take 20% of that to support the Muslim community. The word itself means a fifth of what you've done. That's where 20% kind of comes from. Although this wasn't really practiced widely after the death of Muhammad, but it has become a useful means of financial support in Shia Islam, who sort of coordinate its distribution. So Khums is much broader than Zakat in that it is much more specifically defined than just surplus income. It covers all sorts of earnings, for example, profits, investments, land, riches from war, discovered treasure. And so it's a little bit like Zakat, but it's has a slightly sort of different sort of background context. So it covers investments, trading, agriculture, savings, earnings, inheritance, gifts, and even lottery wins as well. So that's how it's different from Zakat. So let's now take a look at the evaluation question which is associated with this section. So something like this: the extent to which Islam is based in support for the poor. And there's a few lines of argument you can take with this kind of question. So you can argue that Islam has always had a major concern for the poor, Muhammad expressing concern for orphans and widows right at the beginning of Islam. You can say one of the five pillars is zakat, giving is one of the key foundations of Islam. Secondly, extra giving is encouraged as well with sadaq. Concern for the poor runs through each of the five pillars, and Hajj finishes with sacrifice, which is donated to the poor. In the festival of Eid, they give food to the poor, and prayers are often attributed to the poor and the least fortunate in their community. And then you could also discuss ideas about Islam is based upon submission to Allah first and foremost, and care for the poor is secondary. And so although it's important, it's not the most important thing in Islam. You could also talk about the social element is key, but prayer maybe is not the most beneficial way of supporting people. And Islam itself is an all-encompassing religion which offers elements for all parts of life: prayer, fasting, ways of living, following Sharia law, following the halal rules. So it gives you a complete way of living. It's not just about supporting poor people. And then you could also argue that maybe reading the Quran, following Muhammad's messages and teachings, they're the most important thing. And so you could argue that although giving to the poor is important, it's sort of secondary to the primary kind of precept, if you like, the primary ideas contained within Islam.